So, hi, I'm Steve Butler in Los Angeles. I'm a cryptologic analyst, and I'm trying to help local law enforcement solve the Nancy Guthrie um, abduction by reading cryptologic messages that I believe are being passed back and forth between a mastermind in Canada and people on the ground in Arizona. In my attempts to do this, I've had to decode information and get people to believe that I actually know what I'm talking about, which is difficult in a world where the volume of times you hear something seems to be more associated with it being true than the actual truth. So the person who's actually the mastermind of this thing, in my opinion, is a person by the name of Albert Lee Terry Jr., who faked his death in 1971, migrated to Canada, and became Friar David Collins, ex-pastor of the St. John Apostle Church in Kingston, Ontario. And he enlisted local people in the Catalina Foothills area directly related to the University of Arizona. I think for him, he just likes murder and killing. Maybe for them there was some political reason. But that being said, he identified them by pictures and names and different coding material, and I've sent that information to the FBI and the local authorities. I have no idea if they're acting on it or not, but they would first have to believe that it's an interesting lead. I find that the police are more interested in leads that say she's buried 15 miles in the middle of the desert and will send out dogs and ATVs and helicopters to look for bones behind a rock before they actually understand the type of people that they're dealing with. This is not a normal kidnapping. This is not a normal operation. These are not your normal crooks. These people are being led by a person who's ex-military, who's actually one of the people who constructed and was responsible, most likely, for the images that created what's famously known as the Z408 cipher. He was a member of Zodiac. So in a short video, what I'm going to show you is proof that I actually can crack the Z408 cipher. Not for fame, not for being on TV, not to be in the newspapers, but to get these people in Arizona to believe what I'm telling them. That these folks have been saying that Nancy Guthrie's bones are in the St. Thomas More Catholic Church on the campus of the University of Arizona Newman Center. I don't know if they put her there. I don't know if they left her there. I don't know if they moved her. But for months, that's all the chatter that's been going on between them. So you can take a dog, ATVs, and a helicopter out in the desert, or you could take a cadaver dog and walk through the church and find out if you get a hit somewhere where a body should not have been. With that being said, what you're looking at on the screen right now is a gentleman by the name of Frank J. Krebs. He was a private first class in the United States Army, and he served in the Vietnam War. He was born March 7th, 1945, and he died January 17, 1967, which is a very important day in the life of Zodiac. The Z408 came out in July 31, 1969, and it was mailed to 3 different publications. All right, so let's confirm that. The Zodiac cipher for it was printed on July 31st, 1969. On that date, the Zodiac killer sent 3 nearly identical letters to the San Francisco Chronicle, San Francisco Examiner, and Vallejo Times Herald, each containing 1/3 of a 408-character cipher. The letters demanded that the cipher be published on the front page of each newspaper. Well, you can tell these people didn't know what they were talking about right there, because the letters were not identical. And the key to solving this is our guy right here, Frank J. Krebs. So first I'm going to tell you what it is, and then I'll show you a little bit of what it isn't, right? So let's bring this down. So this was what the newspapers received. This one went to the Times Herald, this one went to the Examiner, and this went to the Chronicle. As you can see, the only thing that's identical about these is probably the number of lines, which I haven't actually counted. It might be the exact lines in each one. I doubt it. It's just not something I've actually really thought was important. I did a video on this top line right here to let people know that I could solve this. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work on this side just to show you exactly, without any doubt, that I know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay? First of all, these are not in the correct order on this piece of paper, which I got from a news article from the time. So I had to reorder them in order for us to be able to work with the cipher. And let's see if I can find that reorder. Oh, actually, you know what? That was the reorder, right? Oh, that is it. My bad. That is the right order. Hold on, let me show you the wrong order. Man, I do these things live so you guys can see that I'm human and that I'm not BSing you and that I haven't scripted this madness, right? That I am telling it just like it is. So I had to email it from my phone to my desktop, right? So let's show it in the wrong order. Excuse my voice. So here it is from the article. It's got that weird dude, Alex Baber's name at the bottom of it, who doesn't know a damn thing about what he's talking about, but he's out there trying to make money and get himself famous. So we're just going to ignore that guy. And what I want to do is get his name off the screen. Thank you for working with me here. All right, so this was the order it was in the actual newspaper, right? And so let me just do that real quick. And let's go to Zodiac proper. Here it is in the proper order. Actually, I'm glad that happened because I wasn't going to do this, but I have them side by side, so now you can actually visually see the difference. So in the newspaper article, they had the Examiner at the top, they had the Chronicle in the middle, and they had the Times Herald at the bottom. I believe that was intentional. I believe that the people who knew who these people were, who were covering up everything that they did, and actually had Betty and Don Harden create a false result to say that the Zodiac z408 was solved in 4 days, to create that myth, that story, to keep you from knowing the truth, had them printed in this order on purpose. Because to do something like this where they're definitely not where they're supposed to be, you would have had to know where they were supposed to be. But that being said, let's move to the solution. I'm tired. I hope this is entertaining enough, but it is important, and you will be shocked by the end, and it won't be a long video. So you had the Examiner at the top in the wrong version. The Examiner belongs in the middle, right here. You had the Chronicle in the middle. The Chronicle belongs at the bottom, and you had the Times Herald at the bottom, and it's supposed to be at the top. So let's remove that, right, and let's get to it. So on this line right here, right, like I said, I'm going to tell you what it is first, and I'll tell you what it isn't later. So we'll just get to the solve. So the R is backwards, so you put it up here, so it's RIP. So this is saying Zodiac, the group, because Zodiac was a group, is saying to someone, rest in peace. And then it's saying Z, Zodiac, it's naming Zodiac, it's naming two people as Zodiac. And then you get to this little elbow, right, which looks like an L, probably is an L, but it also is a directional sign. And it's saying you could go this way or this way at this point. So when you're continuing up this way, it says we're also going to remember, and that could be also, right, K, S, and M. And then this is a zodiac sign that is everywhere. It's here. It's here. I have yet to figure out exactly what it means. And there it is there. So what I'm going to show you are the people that they're saying rest in peace to. Are you ready for that? All right. So we're going to move that over. Frank J. Krebs entered the service from Michigan. He had some family connections to the area of Sac County, Iowa. He was a passenger on the UH-1D 64-13726 that crashed, killing its crew of 4 and 4 U.S. Army passengers. They crashed and burned after the main rotor blades and tail boom came off in flight. It is possible that the aircraft was hit with hostile fire, but the exact cause is unknown. If you search the record of the UH-1D 64-13726, you'll find that it was an intelligence helicopter. Okay, so these guys were on an intelligence mission. Here are the names of the 8 casualties that were on board. You have Edgar J. Saffel Jr., Anthony P. Mastro, Frank J. Krebs, James A. Harden, Larry Gray, Herschel Epps, Herbert Crowder, and Richard B. Brockman. All right, I'll do it this way. I was going to do it the other way, but the Lord had other plans. So I'm going to make this bigger, and hopefully this will work. Like I said, I'm doing this live. I didn't prepare this before you guys. You're right with me, but we're already into the meat of this. All right, so Zodiac 2, these people are reversed up here. Rest in peace, Zodiac B. Zodiac B is Richard Brockman. That's Mr. Richard Belton Brockman. He must have been a Zodiac member from Columbia, Richland County, South Carolina. Then Zodiac C. That would be Herbert Crowder. That's Herbert Crowder. It's a picture of a very young man. Herbert Harold Crowder died January 17, 1967. Army Specialist 4, heavy vehicle driver, 25th Infantry Division, 1st Battalion, 5th Infantry Headquarters Company. Died through non-hostile action. And then it goes on to say, remember, right? K, that's our guy Frank J. Krebs, whose page we are actually on. Now, I don't know if Frank J. Krebs was Zodiac, but he was best friends with Albert Lee Terry Jr. As a matter of fact, in 1966, the day before Cherry Jo Bates died, Frank J. Krebs, or 2 days before she died, or a day and a half, Frank J. Krebs and Albert Lee Terry Jr. got into an absolute huge fight where either the military police were called in or the regular police were called in, and this whole thing went back and forth, right? And then in January, he was deceased. People speculate that the reason it says it's still unknown, because for those things to just come apart sounds more like sabotage. I saw a picture of the wreckage. It doesn't look like there was any type of enemy fire that hit that thing. It just came apart because of the cross direction of the force of gravity and the force of the blades and everything. It was horrible. So, okay. And then we have S. That would be Edgar J. Saffel. That's Mr. Saffel, Edgar Joe Saffel Jr. Died January 17, 1967, Vietnam War, Army. Captain was his rank. That's a pretty high rank. On an intelligence helicopter. A captain. In a forward position. God knows what they were up to. They were doing their job to save our lives, our way of life, and our children, our great-great-grandchildren's way of life. So that's the S. The M is Mr. Anthony P. Mastro. Anthony Philip Mastro died January 17th, 1967, Vietnam War, Army Specialist for Helicopter Repairman, non-hostile, died while missing air loss crash land helicopter and crew. I don't know if they didn't recover him or what happened, but January 17th, 1967 is what this whole line is about. So we'll go backwards just so you remember. So you have this line saying read this way. See, all this stuff is like tapes. It codes in every direction like a tape. So you're reading up on this line. So you go here. And if they were substituted and transposed, this wouldn't work. Okay? Unless there's just some magical thing somewhere else in here. I have no idea. But real, actual information that you can go into the public that you could not have known but for cracking the codes is the only way to prove that you've cracked the code. So France isn't speaking German because the English were able to crack, the Enigma machine and found out exactly where the submarines were based on reading the codes. And when they said, hey, there's a submarine at this position, and they went and found that position and the submarine was there, they knew they had cracked the code. So we're cracking the code. So on this position, I'm telling you that the names of the guys that died January 1967 on the 17th in this helicopter are the people that are being reminisced in this line of the Z408. And one is Anthony Mastro. That's the M. The next one is Edgar J. Saffel. That's the S. The next one is Frank J. Krebs. That's the K. Right? Then this says remember, always remember, most likely, but it's an L that's also a directional. But always remember these people, right? And then it comes down to the C, which was before that, right? That person was Herbert H. Crowder. Right there. That's him. Then the B was Richard B. Brockman. That's Mr. Brockman. It's saying all these people were Zodiac. It's very possible, but because they broke it up, there's a possibility that there are two designations here. However, even though it's broken up, there really isn't something that says that they're not. And since they didn't name everybody, then I believe that all these people were a member of Zodiac. Zodiac was a group of people fighting against discrimination in the military and fighting against the war itself because they had become convinced that the administration and the CIA no longer were fighting for freedom in Vietnam or fighting for democracy in Vietnam, but simply fighting as an experiment to develop weapons, to develop torture, and to do all kinds of unreal things. And a war broke out between the CIA and naval intelligence, and it got to the level of the president. The FBI got involved, and at the end of the day, it was so ugly, this thing, that they wrapped it up and put it in a closet. The problem is Albert Lee Terry Jr. got out, and he's not out here murdering people because he believes in a cause. He just likes it. He killed Cherry Joe Bates. He's the mastermind who collected local people to murder a 6-year-old in Joan Benet Ramsey. And he, based on all the coding I can see, is the mastermind with Nancy Guthrie, no matter who's involved. Like I see different things, but he's shown pictures and names of certain people. So I don't blame Zodiac, right? As a matter of fact, had they not murdered people in Benicia, I would have been a Zodiac. I'd have fought with them. I'd have stood with them, right? I think their cause was worthy. There was a lot of problems with the Vietnam War. All the poor kids were dying. The young kids were dying. The rich kids weren't going, right? The CIA was doing all kinds of stuff and not allowing the resources that it took to actually stop the war, which the person who is really the head of the Zodiac, who I cannot mention, knew. And he briefed the administration 92 times, and they said, "Don't call us, we'll call you." And he said, "Guess what? The phone's ringing." Excuse me. He said, "The phone is ringing, bro. You might want to pick it up." So that's what that is. So again, if I have to go through it one more time, just because this is new to you. So on January 1967, 17th, the intelligence helicopter was in a forward position with 8 people on it, including a captain. In the after action report, 60 years later, they're still saying they're not sure why it went down, which means they could not identify any kind of explosive or gunpowder impact on the crash because they recovered the helicopter. But certain parts of the helicopter came loose, and they're believing, in my opinion, that was sabotage. Now, people in the Zodiac, I think, believe that there was a high government official who may have orchestrated that murder. Whether they were right or wrong, they blame this guy. And that was the last straw. So, again, these things need to be in the positions that they are. They are plain text. As far as the meat of the information that's in here, they are not substitution, transposition, ciphers. And this says Zodiac, reverse R, rest in peace, Zodiac B, C, K, S, and M. And I don't know what that thing is right there. So that is Zodiac Richard Brockman, Zodiac Herbert Crowder, Zodiac Frank J. Krebs, Zodiac Edgar J. Saffold Jr., and Zodiac Anthony P. Mastro. Now, I could end the video right here, but what I think I do have time to do is to show you Don and Betty Hardin's solution. The one that everybody says was legitimate, and nobody can produce an official record of how it was substantiated as correct, right? But yet, for 60 plus years, everyone in this game, I'm not in a game, I'm trying to save people's lives, because Albert, if they think he's not still dangerous at his old age, I've been intercepting messages for the last 3 months. This guy's trying to hire a hitman every other week. He's crazy. All right, so here's their solution. So they thought that each individual letter meant some other letter. So they have Z, C, Z, K, right? So right here in the examiner part where you see C, Z, K, they thought C, Z, K was VES. I don't know what to tell you. They thought BPDR right here was LING. Do I really have to do this? I don't even know if I can find it. It's an insult to the people that died on that day. B is Richard Brockman, and C is Herbert Crowder, not V, any. That's my presentation. I know what I'm talking about. Let's bring Nancy home. So I am Steve Butler in Los Angeles. I'm a cryptologic analyst, and I'm trying to help local law enforcement solve the Nancy Guthrie